Metazoa Snapshot is a comprehensive org management solution to help maintain, manage, clean up, and optimize your Salesforce orgs. Visual workspaces with intuitive tools help to reduce complexity and simplify workflow. Just drag, drop, and connect. Optimize your org and lower the total cost of ownership by identifying which assets are used the least and cleaning up unused fields and metadata. Quickly restore metadata in disaster recovery situations by scheduling automated backups or taking snapshots on demand. Easily manage releases and migrate metadata and data between sandbox and production environments while automatically recording deployment history. Visualize profiles and permission sets with mass edit and user assignment capabilities. Compare differences in metadata between orgs and over time, and set notifications to trigger alerts when changes occur. Detailed reporting makes it easy to compare user profiles and manage permission sets across multiple orgs. Reduce complexity with comprehensive org management from Metazoa Snapshot for Salesforce.
We were just a bunch of nerdy kids who ignored the haters. We took their ridicule and we built on it. And when some of us gave up, well, we built on that too. Built resilience, built on a mission to make things a little better every day until the users came. Then the haters were VCs who scoffed at our audacity. This just isn't the way things are done. But we kept building. Users turned into teams, turned into companies, running their entire businesses on our apps. Then the software giants came after us. We weren't proven, we weren't fully featured, our radical cloud model wasn't secure. But we built on. And today, as companies adopt the cloud to move faster, teams are finding themselves slowed down by each other's efforts. The skeptics are claiming we'll never develop innovation at scale. But now, DevOps have come to the cloud, ushering in a new era of transformation. Companies can release on demand across hundreds of environments, innovating faster with fewer conflicts and fewer disruptions. There will always be challenges. There will always be naysayers. And we'll build on.
So today's topic is, bulk updating field level security. And I don't know how many of you have had the checkbox hell of field level security, but it's super fun, right? So we've gone through the speakers, and so this is a beginner admin talk, but there's a lot of data loader in Excel. It's mostly Excel, let's be real, stuff in here. And so if you're lost, please tell me. If not, I can help you through it. It's not a problem. But really all we're doing is finding a key field so that we can load permissions based on that key field. And so you can totally do this. No matter what your skill set is, you can do it as long as you kind of go slow, understand that you might be lost a little bit, but you'll get it, I promise. And then later, if you're still nervous or thought you understood, but then when you go to do it, like always happens to me, here's my information to ask questions if you need to. And again, that's going to be shared in video and et cetera, so please feel free to contact me. I can walk you through it again slowly, and wherever you get stuck, we can go through it. So the agenda, why is this a problem? Why is field level security and object level security a problem? And my last org, before the one I'm in now, we had 600 fields between account, case, and something else in our smaller org. In our big org, we had maxed out 3 of the objects, and we're near max on another 3. So we had about 600 fields on 3 objects. And then here we go, activity, account, and case have 600 in our smaller org. So this is just one of our objects, a list of all of the checkboxes that you can do for field level security. So you just you hate the checkboxes, and you learn to really hate them. And all of the clicks to give permissions to an object are equally painful, because you have to edit, and then you have to click read, write, et cetera, and I know that there's clicks, not code, but I prefer loading data in Excel to clicking 500 times. So that's really what this is about. It's avoiding clicks and making it take 3 minutes instead of 3 hours to do your data load for a permission set change. And so what we're going to do is we're going to find the parts that we need to do this. And they're just a bunch of data exports, and you can do that with Data Loader or with Workbench, or however you like to pull data. Really, I don't care what tool you like to use. So the parts are going to be data exports in Excel. How do they relate? It's a permission set ID. And then we're going to go through how to find the IDs, and then how to build the file that you're going to use to upload the permissions. And then you'll just do Data Loader and you'll be done, and you'll celebrate. And you know, maybe you don't tell anyone the first few times that you've done this, and you go have a glass of wine or whatever you like to drink. So yeah, this is just a close-up of the blurry, ugly, terrible thing where you have your permissions and you have to sort through every line to see which one is which. And if you're doing multiple profiles, you want to shoot yourself. So, you know, Erdős said mathematicians turn coffee into theorems. Well, deep frustration is really what happens, and that turns coffee into solutions. It doesn't matter what your specialty is. And this is going to be easier than, you know, proving an open conjecture for the Erdős prize, because that is, you know, by now they're very, very hard questions. But this one is way easier. So the frustration of this makes the coffee turn, deep frustration turns coffee into solutions. So now the objects that we're going to pull in Data Loader, there's the ones that you need to have here, and then there's the ones that are optional. So you have to have permission sets, and permission sets are that is where the ID lives that you need. So you want to get permission sets, and then the object permissions are called object permissions, and the field permissions are called field permissions. And then I'm assuming that everyone still uses profiles and hasn't done away with those. Like eventually, I think Salesforce may do. So you need the profiles if you're looking at editing profile settings. If you're not looking at editing profile settings and you just want to use permission sets, then you don't need profiles, and it's much easier. But because we generally still use profiles, we have profiles. Oops, I'm sorry. I always try and highlight things here. And when I try and highlight them, it goes to the next slide. So then there's these other things down here in the optional section. So there's permission set assignments, so you can see who the permission sets are assigned to, which is important if you're trying to get to who you want to do it. So, you know, who's assigned to that permission set? Should they really have access to that field? And then the users, if you, again, once you get to permission set assignments, you want to look at the users and get their actual name instead of some gobbledygook ID. And just as an aside, because ours changed to checkboxes recently, the setup entity access object, that has your Apex permissions. So that's access to classes and Visual Force pages. So that one I put in here because that turned into checkboxes, and we had a lot of Apex classes in my old org. And we have a lot now, but it's not nearly as bad. So this can need to be done with Excel as well, but I don't have an example of that here today. And then if you've never used Data Loader before, I put the instructions for Mac on here, but you can just as easily find the instructions for Windows. And the big thing with Data Loader, oops, I'm going backwards, I think I am. The big thing with Data Loader is that you need to install the right version of Java, or a newer version of Java than they say, because otherwise it won't work and you won't have any idea why. It just doesn't do anything. And you're like, oh, why isn't this working? So just get the right version of Java. Right now the OpenJDK is on 14, I think. So in this, everything revolves around the permission set ID, like I said. So the ID is 18 characters long, and what you can get from reports is 15 characters. And what the reason for that is the 15 characters are case sensitive, and 18 characters are case insensitive. So that means you see these numbers and letters down here. That's an ID. And if you have a capital A versus a little a, that's what case sensitive means. So if it's all small letters, it's a different value than if it's this casing of this object, this record ID. So the ID is the key that turns gobbledygook into gobbledyglory. And I already went through, so the first 3 characters of the ID are what object you're looking at. So that can be important if you're trying to figure out what's happening and what thing you're looking at. And that may be above your pay grade right now, but you'll get there. And at some point you'll be like, no, that's even wrong. It's not even that's not a contact. That's something else. I don't remember what it is, but it's not a contact. So you'll get there. And, you know, it took me probably 5 years to start responding to the first 3 digits in a profile, in an ID, to say, oh no, that's not it. It's got to be a contact or an account or something like that. So, and also I've made the mistake of using the 15 character IDs. Don't do it, because you will wind up screwing up the data, because there's a lot of shared 15 character IDs if you're not case sensitive. And Excel is not case sensitive. But, you know, Salesforce just started the unique values and reports, so we may not need a power of 1 field. So maybe we replace that with the case safe ID field. And the case safe ID will, if you put that on your object as a custom field, that displays the 18 character ID, so you can actually build reports with an ID that you can use to load data. And this is kind of an aside to what we're going to do next. So I really want to go the wrong way, so I'm just going to switch to the spacebar here. So we're going to do a bunch of data loader exports. And when you do the data loader export, you're going to want to hit show all Salesforce objects. And I'm going to show you where that is next. But you also may need a security token when you log in. So it depends on your org how it works, but they will email you a security token when you get a new password. And so what you'll do is you'll do your password and then the security token right after it. So here I have my fake password of password exclamation point. So you do password exclamation point and then the security token. And this is kind of a picture of data loader, and I think they're sharing the slides. So I'm just going to get out of here and go over to data loader, because it's going to be easier to look at here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be exporting. And this is where that checkbox is that says show all Salesforce objects. And you can see that there's a bunch of stuff that when I undo that, we go, there's just no objects there. I mean, I know there are objects, but like you don't have a whole lot to select from. And there's field analysis, and this is all because we have plugins. And so now, or sorry, App Exchange apps. So now I'm going to hit show all Salesforce objects, and you can see that there's way more stuff here.
Becca,
And we're going to go, sorry.
Sorry, there was a question about using data loader IO instead. I mean, I know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You can use whatever thing you like to export data and import data. I just am used to data loader, so that's what I'm using here.
I think with IO, you only get like 3 free ones a month or something like that. So, so there's a limitation there depending on. So I just never go to it because data loader is free.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, data loader comes. It's free and it's from Salesforce, so it generally will work as long as you have the right Java version. That took me like 3 days to figure out. So, but yeah, so there's lots of objects here now, and the things that we're looking for is field permissions. And you can, then you just browse, and whatever program you use, it doesn't matter, whichever one you want to use. You'll choose your file, etc., etc. But I'm going to go to profiles because I think I don't have that one. So I'm going to name it something easy to understand, because then you go to your desktop and you're like, oh my God, there's too many files on here. Well, if you're looking at my desktop, that is. So then you say save, it already exists. Okay, well, I have these already. And then next, I don't care that I'm replacing it. And then I select all fields because I'm lazy and I don't want to remember anything. And so I just select all the fields and then do finish. It'll warn you that you're going to perform an export. And I don't know if anyone hasn't done this before, but if you haven't, remember, whenever you do data loading stuff, do not start in production. You want to start in a sandbox so that if you screw up the data, you're not screwing up production. So that's just never start in production, because you'll inevitably mess something up, and you just don't know what's going to go wrong with these things. And I'm super neurotic, so I like to take a copy of what I'm overwriting before I overwrite it, because I'm neurotic. Now, not everyone will need to do that, or, you know, if you're doing 1 or 2 fields, it doesn't really matter. But in reality, because this is security that we're talking about, I like to have a backup that is current, like right now. Because if I screw it up, or if someone says, oh, this is wrong or something later, I can say, okay, here's what it was set to, and here's what I set it to.
I did it. I'm guilty.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where it's like, okay, you just need to have that when it's security.
Because I mismapped something and I had to go back to the original and pull it all back.
Yeah, yeah. And we've had things where, you know, you're just off by 1 row, which is just like, oh my God, I'm such a fool. So, but you know, everything under the sun can happen. And this way you have some assurance that you can put it back the way it was. So you have this export of what it was, and you're going to use that to make the edits. So I'm just going to cancel out of this because I don't actually need to do anything here. But that's data loader. And the big thing here is that checkbox, show all Salesforce objects, or you won't find any of this stuff. So now we are out of Salesforce, and we're going to see if we can't find Excel. And is this the right file? Yes. So I have an Excel file in my shared folder for this, but I don't really understand how that's going to get shared. But I can share this file because it has lookups in it that make it a little bit easier to look at. So this is what permission sets look like, and they're very ugly. And I have things mashed down so that I can, you know, see things. So this is just, you know, permissions true or false. There's a lot of permissions true or false here. And sorry, I'm going all over the place. I'm just trying to make this a little bit more visible. So permissions to access CMC. So it's just, you know, all your permissions true or false. And you see these when you are in system permissions. You see them when you're in the objects or the app permissions. There's just all the different permissions. It's a very, very large file. And I have it split. I have my screen split so that we can see the columns where I'm kind of trying to make sense of things. So this is just, I think this is created by, no. Yeah, so one of these is who created it, who last modified it, and then the profile name. So it's either going to be, these are all profiles. So somewhere in here, I have permission names too. And I've messed with this file a lot before this talk, so we may be just screwy. So, oh yeah, I've got the wrong field there. So it's looking at C instead of O. So this is where I say it's a lot of Excel, because it's one of those where you don't necessarily need to know all of this, because this is kind of, that's why I put this pink stuff in here, because I'm like, it's easier to grok if you see this. But if you don't see it, it's okay. And if you don't understand it, that's okay too. Because all you really care about is the profile ID. So we're looking to make modifications to a profile, right? So we paste in a profile, and I like to paste them all into one spreadsheet so that I have it all in one place. So I paste in my profile data. So I just copy paste the columns, and then I paste in my permission sets, I paste in my objects, I paste in my field permissions. And they're in a different order in the org that I exported from just now. So this is where it's like, if you want to edit these formulas, do, but because your order in your org might be different depending on what custom fields you have in however you export it. You can export it in the same order, but that would take hours to set up. But really, this is ID, description, name. So these I kind of tried to title the columns so that you would know what it was trying to look at. So you can just map ID to ID, description to description, name to name, wherever name is, here, so that you know what's happening. So that's where it's, you just don't know what you're going to run into. And I don't know what you're going to run into, which is why I also gave my contact information, because this can get super complicated and overwhelming. And don't be overwhelmed. We can ignore this pink part and say, okay, what profile are we looking for? We're looking for a partner resource. So what we want to grab from here is the ID of the profile. So we're going to say, okay, partner resource, the ID of that is this. So I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to come over to permission sets. And I am going to go to find. I'm going to paste it there. And of course it found it, but it's in a bad place. Okay, so I might need to reload my permission sets. Oh no, I don't. Okay, so we found it. It's in row 45. So I'm just going to bold this because I lose my place a lot. So it's in row 45. So what we need from here is the ID of the permission set for that profile. So the profile is here. Oops, sorry. The profile is, I thought it was in this column.
We also have a question about, would it be best practice after all modifications are performed to upload the data during off-peak usage in Salesforce if you're doing profiles?
It probably would, because that way you won't be changing permissions while someone is in there, and they'll be able to save what they're saving and be good. Most of the time when I do this, I'm granting permissions, not revoking. Because what happens, what used to happen to me all the time is that developers wouldn't take a current thing. They wouldn't take the current code. They would just take what they already had from yesterday. And if something got updated to give people permission to something, it would then get overwritten the next day when the developers put the code through. So, and it wasn't anything that, and sometimes they don't even know that they're doing it because, you know, this is metadata. So it gets a little hanky in the whole act of doing the changes. So when you bring in a profile through the metadata, it changes things that you don't expect because you made edits to, say, you built a new object and you gave profiles access to that object. Just don't transfer the profiles with the object. Profiles are one of those things you just do manually in production after you've tested them in Sandbox. First, you always do it in Sandbox. Second, you do it in production. So just always test it first because profiles are security. So let's just say that this is our profile because I've lost my place. But basically you search for your profile ID, you find it, and you use that to get your permission set ID. So this is the ID that we're going for. And we are going to say, so now I'm going to copy this. And because I'm lazy and I don't want to think and I don't want to find anything, I'm going to grab the conditional formatting. I'm going to say highlight cells that contain. I'm going to paste that in there. And then I'm going to say, okay, and then I've done it wrong because I wanted to do the whole column. So I'm just going to do it again. And this is, you know, my usual process is to do this once or twice to get it right. So now we've highlighted the whole column. We've marked this field as the one we're looking for. So then what we can do is we can format paste and go to object permissions, and parent ID is where that lives. And you can see that the fields were in a different order here. Oh God, no, I did the wrong thing. Okay, but you can see that the formatting, that's not right. Sorry, I'm looking at it and I'm like, that's not right. So conditional formatting, highlight cells that contain that FGIQ, yes. There we go. That looks more right. And because I had my joyous tech support drama before here, I'm just going to delete those two because that's not the right headers. Okay, so this is your profile. Yeah, okay. So now we have the parent ID is this. And now we're going to go ahead and format paste again because I didn't copy it right the first time. So now we are in the field level security, and I've got, it's a little hanky here because I've got the two orgs and I didn't have time to clean it up. So let me just delete these guys.
We also have a question. So
Okay.
a profile is kind of a jumbo permission set, and I figured I'd let you answer that.
It sort of is. It depends on whether, because it, like if you're using standard system admin, you can't edit that profile. Like you can add things to the bottom, you can add visual force pages, etc., but you can't edit the sorry,
The native Salesforce.
yeah, the native Salesforce. So all those checkboxes you can't edit.
Right.
So, oh good Lord.
I would just say that a profile sets the baseline for permissions, and a permission
yeah, so
extends it.
yeah, so the profile kind of sets some permissions, and then what you use permission sets for generally is to add permissions to individuals. And so when you add those permissions, it's adding to the profile. So you would add that they can edit, say, cases when they couldn't edit cases before. And only 2 people in that profile group can edit the cases, so you just create a permission set for that. And I know that cases is probably a terrible example because if you can edit cases, there's a lot of people doing that. But if you build a new object that you want to test out, you want to give just a couple people access to test it, you would use a permission set, and then you can bring people on slowly to using it and get them all in it and make all the tweaks that you need before you push it out to all of the users. And so you can validate your directions, you can do all of the things with a couple of users with a permission set, and then you can keep the whole thing separate in a permission set if you want to do it that way, or you can add the permissions to the profile. But I think that the recommended way now is to do the permission sets, because it's and there's permission set groups, which I don't know if anyone uses those yet, but permission set groups are another way that you can group the different permissions that you need for, say, a person who is in charge of the keys, the keys for encryption, and the event logs for monitoring instead of the event logs, so you can add access to groups of things that way. So different people can have widely varying permissions now. And it's kind of a bear to report on as far as permissions go. And that's the hard part about permission sets, really, is that profiles are easier because it's something standard and you know where the permissions lie. And it's usually, I know this is awful to say, but it shouldn't be, but it is usually better defined what a profile means than what a permission set means as far as your user group. And that should not be true. You should really define who's going to get access to the permission set before you build it. But I've found that doesn't really happen regularly. So hopefully that made it better and not worse.
So just say, checking time here, you have about 8 minutes.
Okay, then I'm going to really hustle now. So we basically are highlighting each parent ID to be the permission set that we need to edit. So we've done that. Now we can data sort by the color of the cell. So you get all of the permissions that that has access to. So I'm just going to delete that one. And we're going to call this one, oh, great. It doesn't see it. Oh, I'm in the wrong column. So this is basically the reason that I colored the cells was strictly to sort, because then once you sort it, all of your stuff is grouped together. Ooh, too far. Into, someday I'll get there. And it probably didn't work. So all of your stuff will be grouped into a lovely group, say with this, I've got terrible examples here. So we're just going to pretend that this is all pink. And it worked, and so we don't have to deal with that. So it'll group everything together so you know what permissions they have. And the permissions on the object are, I'm just going to undo it so I get this. The create, it's just the CRUD permissions, right? And the S object. So this is your object name, your S object name, your view all records, and it's view all the records on the object, read all the records on the object, or modify all the records on the object, edit, delete, create. So you can edit these as you like. And then for each object that you need to do, and if you want to add an object, you just put the S object, the API name for that object. And the same is true of field permissions. Now there's a lot of options on object that are not available on field permissions. So because field permissions are based on the object, so if you don't have access to the object, you can't do anything. So we have the object name here, and then whether you can read and whether you can edit. So you can read a field and you can edit a field. If you only want them to have read access, you can do that. And that's kind of the values. So what you're going to do here we have the field name. Sorry, I skipped that piece. So when you have the field name, it is the API name for the object. So API object dot, and that's called dot notation, the API name for the field. And if it has underscore C at the end of it, it's custom. And I had some custom ones here. So you can see these are all custom objects. So you would have ETA, whatever, SMS definition underscore C dot, whatever the field name is. And then you can just create your permissions for the profile. So you can just copy this down and create permissions. So then you would say whether they can edit or whether they can read. And if you don't want to change the permissions, you just don't do anything with it. But so you can make this all false. And I know that this probably would never be true, and you would never do it because you don't know what profiles those are. But then we say, okay, here's the fields, here's the permissions. Now we can go back and update these. So we go from the parent ID and we would save it as a CSV file. And I'm guessing that you all know that you save it as a CSV file. And then you would go back to, let me get out of full screen, data loader. And you would do, I like to do an upsert every time because then I don't have to worry about the IDs. It's one at a time. So sorry, I'm retarded speaking. So you're gonna update and insert at the same time. So if the record already exists and needs to be edited, it needs to have an ID, which these do, and it will update or insert depending on whether it has that ID or it matches that ID. So we're going to show all Salesforce objects, field permissions, and we're going to browse, and I do have a load file set. So
We're at 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay. We can just pretend then, oh, here's the object. We'll switch to object. No problem.
And we had a
So-
question about bulk updating using a DevOps tool, any other DevOps tool. Can you do the same thing?
If the DevOps tool can edit these objects, because I don't know what DevOps tool, I don't know really the capabilities of different DevOps tools.
Right, right.
So I would guess that you can, if you can edit metadata and you can edit these objects with it. Because I think of DevOps tools as more of a change set migrator that makes it easy to move a change set. As far, you know, as lame as that sounds for description of DevOps tool, but it logs it and keeps version control and is beautiful. But beyond that, I don't know their capabilities. So
one suggestion, Becca, because we are running out of time, is if in your slide deck you can put those examples before you post your slide deck.
Yeah, they're all in the slide deck.
People will probably be able to.
Yeah, so the slides also go through this.
Okay.
And how to find the IDs, where it is, and then the steps to upload.
Awesome.
So yeah, this is all in the slide deck.
I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I want to thank everybody for attending today.